Very good morning to all students. So by now you have covered a good amount of general pharmacology, and I believe that you are aware and you are well familiar with the pharmacodynamics and the pharmacokinetic concepts. So today we shall be discussing about the different factors affecting drug action. This topic we shall be covering under the following headings. That is, we shall be listing the different factors affecting the drug action, and then we shall be describing each factor in detail. So all of you know that the variation in response to the same drug can occur between patients or even in the same patients when the same drug is given on different occasions. Okay, so if you give the same drug to two different individuals, A and B, you can expect a difference in the response, a slight difference in the response between these two individuals. And in the same individual, if you give the same drug on two different occasions, then also you can expect a change in the response. Now, why is this so? It is because there are different factors which can affect the drug action. And these factors, which we will be learning today, they can affect the drug action either quantitatively, that is, they can increase or decrease the action, or they can change it qualitatively. That means they can alter the type of reaction, type of response. So most of the factors, they bring about a quantitative change in the drug response. There are only a few factors which bring about a qualitative change in the drug response. Now, why is this topic important? This is important because the understanding of these factors which can modify the drug action can guide the physician in the choice of the appropriate drug as well as the dose for a particular patient. So as you go through the topic, you will understand the significance of this topic better. So we shall first list all the factors which are affecting the drug action. These can be either the patient factors, like the body size of the patient, the age of the patient, gender, the species and the race of the patient, the genetic makeup of the patient, the environmental factors, and the time of administration of the drug, the psychological states of mind, pathological states of the patient, the tolerance. Okay, all these are the patient factors which can affect the drug action. Then there are some drug factors which can affect the drug action. For example, the route by which it is given, the presence of other drugs, and also the accumulation effect. So all these things we shall be discussing in detail one by one. So we'll start with the body size. So all of you, I think, would be roughly knowing that the body size can influence the concentration of the drug attained at the site of action. Now, all these tablets, okay, they are all available in the market in a particular dose. Like for example, when you take paracetamol, like even a layman knows it's approximately 500 milligram that is usually given for an adult. So this average adult dose of drugs is actually calculated for a medium built individual, that is weighing about 70 kilograms. Now, this dose will be sufficient enough for a large population because majority will fall in this category. A little bit here and there, above or less than 70 kilos, can be given the same dose. But for individuals who are extremely obese or extremely lean, and also for children, you cannot give the same average adult dose. There you have to calculate the individual dose based on their body weight. Now for that we have a simple mathematical formula. You will give body weight into average adult dose divided by 70. This is nothing requiring a pharmacological information. This is just pure mathematics. Okay, so this is how you calculate for extremely obese, lean individuals and in children who will not fall in the category of the 70 kg individual. Then there have been arguments that instead of the body weight, the body surface area is better to calculate the dose for an individual. But this is not actually practiced for most of the drugs. The dose of the drug calculation based on body surface area, this is practiced only for administration of anti-cancer drugs. Okay, so for an average individual, the body surface area comes to about 1.7 meters square. Okay, and now you can, based on the individual body surface area, you can calculate the dose required for a particular individual. Now, how can you calculate, or how can you know the body surface area of any individual? That can be done by a formula which is called as a Du Bois formula. And also there are nomograms which are based on the height and the weight. So if you go to oncology departments where anti-cancer drugs are used, and these anti-cancer drugs are based mainly given as per the body surface area. So in these wards you will see there are nomograms which are based on the height and the weight. So if you know the height and the weight of the patient, you can find out how much will be the body surface area of that patient. And then if you substitute that here in this formula, you will get the individual dose of the anti-cancer drug for that particular patient. So I've just repeated that again here with an example. You can see average adult dose of paracetamol is 500 milligram. That is, it is meant for an individual who is 70 kilograms. It will cater to majority of the population. Now let us calculate the dose of paracetamol for a child named Raju who is weighing 20 kilos. To substitute the values in the formula which I have given in the previous slide, and you will see that the child Raju requires only 143 milligrams of paracetamol. Okay, now we'll see the influence of age as a factor for modifying the drug action. So we'll take the extremes of age. That is, we'll see the pediatric age group and the elderly age group. These are the two age groups where you will see there are some changes in the physiology of the individual. Okay, and the majority of the individual, they'll be between this age group. So we'll not be considering them. We'll see the pediatric age and the elderly age where there is a variation in the physiology of the individual. You cannot consider a small child as a miniature adult. It is not so. There is a change in the physiology of the child which can alter the pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics of the drug. Similarly, in an elderly also, there are some changes in the physiology which can alter the pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics of the drug. Now, there are some formulas which have been given to calculate the dose of drugs in children based on the age. Now, this is the Young's formula, Dilling's formula. You can see how the Young's formula is. You substitute the age of the child, that is age divided by age plus 12 into adult dose. Similarly, in Dilling's formula, you divide the age of the child by 20 into adult dose. This is the way you get the dose of a drug in a child based on the age. But this is not a reliable formula, because you know that a child may be aged 3 years, but he might be either undernourished or underweight or overweight. So age is not, these formulas are not really reliable in most situations. We have to always go in for the body weight based calculations, which I have told you in the previous slide, than the age based calculations of the child dose. Now let us see how the pharmacokinetics changes in children. So you can see the drug absorption in a child can get altered because of the lower gastric acidity and the increased intestinal transit time in a child. So you already know that the acidity is required for the absorption of certain drugs. Now, because of the lower gastric acidity, it may alter the absorption of certain drugs. Similarly, the absorption of most of the drugs takes place from the intestine. Now, if there is an increased intestinal transit time, it can alter the absorption of drugs. Now, the transdermal absorption in children will be more than the adults, because for obvious reason, because they have got a thin skin as compared to that of adults. Similarly, the rectal absorption also is faster in children than adults. So making use of this thing that rectal absorption is faster in children, there's a drug that is called as diazepam. Diazepam is used rectally for febrile seizures. When you were studying the routes of drug administration, you have seen that this drug, that is diazepam, given by the rectal absorption to control febrile seizures. This is used because the rectal absorption is very fast in children as compared to that of adults. Now, the blood-brain barrier, already you know, is more permeable to drugs. It is not well formed, it is permeable to drugs, and this will be more in case of the premature infants. Now that is why they have got a high chance of kernicterus because of the easy entry of bilirubin. Now any drug which displaces bilirubin from its plasma protein binding site can lead to kernicterus in children because the blood-brain barrier is very easily permeable to the bilirubin as well as to the other drugs. Drug metabolism is also inadequate in children, and this can lead to the toxicity of certain drugs. One of the examples is gray baby syndrome, which can occur with the use of chloramphenicol. Chloramphenicol is an antibiotic, and it is metabolized by conjugation reactions. Now, in children, the metabolism is inadequate, and this can lead to toxicity that is called as gray baby syndrome. The details of these things you will be learning as you proceed in the pharmacology syllabus. And the newborn also has a low GFR, that is glomerular filtration rate, and also has an immature tubular transport. So what will happen? It will prolong the T-half of drugs which are excreted by the kidney. For example, there are drugs like gentamicin and penicillin which are excreted by the kidney. Now, if there is a low glomerular filtration and the low tubular transport, what will happen? The kidney will not excrete these drugs properly. So what will happen? These drugs will be there in the body for a longer time, and this will prolong the T-half, and this can even lead to toxicity. So you have to be always careful to take to reduce the dose of these drugs in the infants, in children. It is only after 7 months that the glomerular filtration rate and the renal tubular mechanisms reach the adult proportions. So till 7 months, you have to be careful that the dose of such drugs, if they are used, that is gentamicin and penicillin, should be kept low. Now, there are some adverse drug reactions which are peculiarly seen only in children. For example, the growth retardation. It occurs with steroids and androgens. So, this can cause epiphyseal fusion in children, premature epiphyseal fusion in children, and can lead to growth retardation. This will not be seen in adults for obvious reasons because their epiphysis is already closed. Similarly, tetracyclines, they can cause the discoloration of forming or developing teeth, and this is how it looks. Tetracycline can cause a discoloration of teeth in children. Okay, so these are the areas which are peculiar only in the children. Now we'll go into the other extreme of the age group, that is the elderly population. Again, let us look at how the pharmacokinetic changes are different in the elderly. So we start with absorption. So slower absorption of drugs due to decreased gut motility and reduced blood flow to intestines. Then we'll see the distribution. So there is a lesser plasma protein binding of acidic drugs because there is less albumin. There is less albumin in elderly, so what will happen? The acidic drugs which are binding to the albumin, they will not be binding, and hence their free levels will be more. Free levels are the active levels. So the free levels will be more of these acidic drugs, and they can be toxic. They can lead to toxicity also. So what will you be careful about? You will be careful that you use a lower dose of acidic drugs in elderly population. Similarly, the volume of distribution of lipophilic drugs also increases in the elderly because they have got a more amount of fat proportion. Okay, compared to an adult, the elderly have got more of fat. So the volume of distribution of drugs which are distributed in the fat will be more. But that of the hydrophilic drugs will be low. That means because the blood volume is decreased in the elderly. So based upon that, your volume of distribution will be different for lipophilic drugs and hydrophilic drugs. Now coming to the metabolism, you can see that there is a decreased functioning of enzymes and decreased blood flow to the liver. So what will happen? The metabolism of certain drugs will be decreased, and this can lead to toxicity. So again, you have to be careful that the drugs which are metabolized by liver, the dose should be reduced in elderly. Similarly, the renal excretion also is decreased because of nephron loss. Again, this can lead to toxicity, and you should be careful to reduce the dose of drugs which are purely excreted by the kidney. So lots of dose adjustments have to be made in the elderly also because of these factors. Now let us see what are the pharmacodynamic changes in the elderly. Okay, so the receptor activity of certain receptors will decrease. For example, beta receptors. In the elderly, the beta receptors will respond in a decreased manner to both the agonistic drugs and the antagonistic drugs. At the same time, the elderly can be oversensitive to certain drugs. For example, they can be overtly sensitive to a drug called digitalis, which is used for cardiac failure. Now, just like we said, the adverse drug reactions, which are peculiar to children, we have got adverse effects which are peculiar to elderly also. For example, the urinary retention. This can occur more with the use of anticholinergic drugs in elderly. Now, this is because this is because the elderly may be having associated benign prostatic hypertrophy, and given when anticholinergic drugs are given in elderly with BPH, this can add on to the urinary retention. Okay, similarly, postural hypotension can be seen with the use of antihypertensives in elderly. So antihypertensives decrease the BP, but the postural hypotension, that is when the patient stands up, he'll feel dizzy and may fall. This can occur more in the case of elderly as compared to the adult population taking the antihypertensive drugs. Similarly, when you give a hypnotic drug to an elderly, he can be more confused as compared to an adult who is taking a hypnotic drug. Hypnotic drugs are the drugs which are used to induce a normal sleep pattern. Now, this can create a lot of confusion when given to an elderly population than when it is given to an adult population. Okay, so with that we finish the body size and the age as a factor affecting drug action. Now we'll see how the gender can affect the drug action. So in case of females, you already know they have got a relatively smaller body size proportion, so that they'll be requiring lower doses. And also there are subjective effects in females because of their mental makeup. The way a female responds to a disease or the treatment might be different than a male because of obvious differences in their mental makeup. Now, you have to give special consideration to the menstruation, pregnancy, and lactation in females while prescribing the drugs. Also, this is very important. That is, just like we told you that there are physiological differences in the elderly and the children. Similarly, there is a physiological difference in a pregnant woman. So you already have learned that pregnancy is an altered physiological state. There are various differences which occur. That is, there is reduced GI motility. The volume of distribution increases because of the expansion of the extracellular fluid volume. The albumin levels fall, whereas the alpha acid glycoprotein levels increase. Renal blood flow increases, hepatic metabolism is faster. So all this can have implications in the disposition of the drugs. For example, you can see there is a fall in the albumin levels. So what will happen? You will have more amount of free acidic drugs, whereas there is an increase in the alpha acid glycoprotein levels. So there will be decreased basic free levels of basic drugs. See, all these concepts you have studied earlier. So you should be able to apply these concepts now. When I'm discussing these factors, you should be able to understand it well because based on your previous chapters. Okay. Now, again, one more thing that we have to be very much careful while prescribing drugs in pregnancy is the adverse effects that can occur in the developing fetus. And that is referred to as teratogenicity, which you will be learning further in your next topic. Okay, now whenever we prescribe a drug to the pregnant woman, we should be very careful that it should be safe so that it doesn't cause any unwanted effects in the fetus. Then regarding the adverse drug reactions in females and males, okay, so gynecomastia can occur with the use of ketoconazole and digitalis in males. Okay, that is one unwanted effect. Similarly, if you prescribe androgens to females, it is unacceptable. And similarly, if you prescribe estrogens to men, obviously it is unacceptable for obvious reasons. Now, let us see the species and race, how they affect the drug action. So we can just quote a few examples of racial differences in drug responses. So you can see blacks, they require higher concentration of a drug called atropine in order to dilate their pupils. Beta blockers are less effective as antihypertensives in African population. Then there's this condition called as, it's an adverse reaction called as the suboptic SMON, that is reported with the use of quinidoclor in Japanese population. Now, this was an adverse drug reaction which was only reported in the Japanese population. It was not, this has not been reported in any other populations, including Indian population. This is not reported. This is a kind of optic neuropathy which is reported only in the Japanese population with the use of quinidoclor. Okay, now this is the next important one, how genetics influence the drug responses. This is a very, very important topic because this is a very new field as well as a recent field where a lot of trials have been done and a lot of studies are being undertaken to explore this field of genetics and drugs. Okay, so the drug response shows individual variability due to differences in the genetic composition of individuals. Now here, pharmacogenetics is a study of genetic basis for the variability in the drug response. So here we are just studying what is the genetic basis which is causing the variation in drug response in different individuals. Now, what is pharmacogenomics? It is a use of genetic information that we have got from pharmacogenetics to guide the choice of drug and dose in an individual basis. So based on the differences in genetic makeup of an individual, we have to prescribe the dose and the drug and the dose in the individual. So this is actually accomplished by pharmacogenetics and pharmacogenomics. So we'll just see some of the examples where you can see some of the differences in the drug responses based on some genetic differences. So I'll just quote a few examples. There are other examples also which are quoted in your textbook. So individuals with atypical pseudocholinesterase, they have got prolonged succinylcholine apnea. Succinylcholine is a skeletal muscle relaxant. If you give it to an individual who is having an atypical pseudocholinesterase enzyme, he will have more prolonged apnea with this drug. Similarly, patients who are having G6PD deficiency, in those patients, if you prescribe primaquine, sulfonamide, dapsone, and so on, these drugs can lead to hemolysis. Similarly, persons who are having a low activity of CYP2C9 enzyme, you know this is a cytochrome P450 enzymes. If you have these individuals who are having a low activity CYP2C9, they metabolize warfarin very slowly and they can have a risk of bleeding. Similarly, there is an enzyme that is called as thiopurine methyltransferase. This deficiency can lead to increased risk of bone marrow toxicity with 6-mercaptopurine. Another one is polymorphism of the N-acetyl gene, transferase gene, that is a NAT2 gene. It can result in rapid or slow acetylation of isoniazid, procainamide, and hydralazine. Okay, now you have already seen these drugs are metabolized by acetylation. Now there are individuals who can have a polymorphism of this NAT2 gene, and based on that you can have rapid metabolizers and slow acetylators of these drugs, which I hope you have already studied in your topic on metabolism. There are other reactions, or other variations also, which I'm not going to discuss. I've just listed them here, so you can refer them from your textbook. Okay, now the route of drug administration also governs the speed and intensity of the drug action. So you have learned elaborately about the different routes and their advantages and disadvantages. So I'm not going into detail about that. So you are already aware that the parenteral administration is used when we want a rapid action and we want a predictable drug action. And oral drug route administration is used when we don't have we require a rapid action. Similarly, we use a sublingual route of drug administration. When we want a rapid action because it bypasses the first pass metabolism. Now, there are some drugs which can have different actions when different routes are used. One such drug is magnesium sulfate. It can be given orally as a purgative. Okay, and when it is used topically, it can reduce the swelling. So it can be used on all these edematous areas, and it can reduce the swelling when it is applied as a topical formulation. And it is given IV intravenously for preeclampsia to control the hypertension and seizures. Now, the next factors are environmental factors and the time of administration of drugs. So, we'll see some examples. So, you can see exposure to insecticides, tobacco, smoke, charcoal, broiled meat. They can induce the drug metabolism. This, I think, you have studied when you have learned the inducers of drug metabolism. The food can interfere or enhance the absorption of drugs. For example, food decreases the ampicillin absorption, whereas we require a fatty food to increase the absorption of drugs like griseofulvin and lumefantrine. These are all examples which you have to just remember by heart. Then the timing of the drug administration. For example, hypnotics. I told you earlier, hypnotics are the drugs which are used to induce the normal sleep pattern. Now, hypnotics, when they are taken at night and in calm atmosphere, they'll work better for obvious reasons. If you give a hypnotic at daytime, you can expect that the drug will not be acting good enough. But if you give it at night and in a calm atmosphere, it will work more easily. Similarly, statins are a group of drugs which are used to reduce cholesterol levels, and this act better when they're given later at night. Now let us look at the psychological factor of the individual and how it affects the drug response. Now, placebo. I think you already have learned, or at least you have a fair idea about what a placebo is. Placebo in Greek means I shall please. That is the word meaning of placebo. So what is placebo? It's an inert substance which is given in the garb of a medicine. That is, it is an inert substance which is given in the disguise of a medicine. This works mainly by the psychodynamic effect rather than the pharmacodynamic effect, and it often produces effects which are equivalent to the active drug. Now, this placebo is often prescribed when the physician feels that this person doesn't require an active drug. So many times you would have come across occasions, or you would have even seen in movies or in your own family, when the patient feels that he is having a disease and he requires a medicine, but actually he doesn't even having a disease, or it doesn't require a medicine. So in this situation, just to please the patient, the doctor may prescribe a placebo, and this placebo may relieve the anxiety, the patient's concerns by its psychodynamic effects. Most of the times, lactose tablets and capsules and distilled water injections are used as placebo. Nocebo means it's just the opposite effect of the placebo. It's a negative psychodynamic effect evoked by the pessimistic attitude of the patient, or the loss of faith in the medication or in the physician. That means here the patient is not getting the outcome because he is pessimistic, or he has lost the faith in the medicine or in the physician. Now, this nocebo effect opposes the therapeutic effect of active medication. Okay, this is the differences between placebo and nocebo. Now we'll see how the pathological states affect the drug disposition. So I'll just quote a few examples of important diseases which can affect the drug disposition. So GI diseases, for example, celiac disease, it can decrease the absorption of ampicillin, whereas it can increase the absorption of a drug called cephalexin. Achlorhydria, that's lack of gastric acid, it decreases the absorption of aspirin. You know why? Because aspirin requires an acidic medium for absorption. Okay, so now next one is the liver disease, the chronic liver disease. So you already know liver is a site for metabolism, and hence a lot of drugs can be affected in case of liver disease because their bioavailability can be affected. The drugs which are having a high first pass metabolism, their bioavailability will be increased because they are not undergoing the first pass metabolism in the liver. in case of a liver disease. Similarly, the albumin levels will be very low in the case of liver disease. So what will happen? The plasma protein binding of acidic drugs will be decreased, and their free levels will be increased. One such example is diclofenac. Similarly, the metabolism of drugs may decrease, for example, that of morphine. So all these drugs, the doses of these drugs have to be adjusted in the case of liver disease accordingly. Similarly, in kidney disease, that is chronic renal failure, you can have clearance of drugs which are excreted through the kidney can get affected, and they can lead to toxicity. So examples are aminoglycosides and digoxin. So these effects, that is the effect of liver disease and the kidney disease in drug disposition, you will be learning elaborately in the practical classes, and hence I'm not going into the further details here in this theory lecture. Now we shall look at the other factors. Now, whenever there's other drugs given along with a drug, that can interfere with the action of the first drug, either by synergism or antagonism. That means the other drug can either add on to the effect of the first drug, or it can antagonize the first drug. Again, this details on the synergism and antagonism between drugs you will learn further in detail in the next topic on combined effects of drugs. Next, let us look at the effect of accumulation on the drug action. So any drug which will accumulate in the body can always lead to toxicity. And one such example is chloroquine. Prolonged administration of chloroquine can cause its accumulation in the retina and can lead to retinal toxicity. Now we look at the last topic of this session, that is tolerance. It is very important, can come as a short note also. So what is the definition of tolerance? Tolerance means it is the requirement of a higher dose of a drug to produce a given response. So for example, today you are taking a drug A for controlling or as a painkiller or as an analgesic. Okay, so you are getting the adequate pain relief with the use of this drug, and with the use of say 500 milligram of this drug. After prolonged use, you may not be having the pain relief with the 500 milligram of this drug. That means what? You have developed a tolerance to this drug. Now you require a higher dose than 500 milligram to produce the same pain relief. Okay, that is the requirement of a higher dose of a drug to produce a given response is referred to as tolerance. Tolerance can be either natural tolerance or acquired tolerance. Natural tolerance means here the individual is inherently less sensitive to the drug. For example, he has never responded to the drug. For example, the black races, they have been always tolerant to mydriatic. So they always have been needing a higher dose to produce the same amount of mydriasis, which would be produced by a lower dose in other individuals. In the case of acquired tolerance, it occurs by repeated use of a drug in an individual who was initially responsive. Now, this is acquired tolerance is the one that we usually see, because the individual would be sensitive or would be responding to a particular dose, but with continuous use, he becomes less responsive, and that is, he develops tolerance to that particular dose. And this is mainly seen with the use of CNS depressants. Now, tolerance may not develop equally to all the actions of a drug. So we'll support some examples. For example, tolerance develops to the sedative action of chlorpromazine, but not to its antipsychotic action. Chlorpromazine is an antipsychotic drug. It can produce sedative action also. Now, the tolerance develops to sedative action, but not to antipsychotic action. That means when you're giving chlorpromazine, after some time, the patient will not feel sedative. However, the antipsychotic action will still be there, which is actually good, because the antipsychotic effect will be there and the patient will be active. He will not be sedated. Okay. On the other hand, similarly, tolerance develops to sedative action of phenobarbital, but not to its anti-epileptic action. The next example is tolerance develops to analgesic action of morphine, but not to its constipating action. This is not a good tolerance. I mean, this is not a wanted tolerance, or it is not a favorable tolerance, because we don't want the person to develop tolerance to the analgesic action of morphine. That means what? To get the pain relief, we had to go on increasing the dose after some time. That is not wanted. But here, the patient develops tolerance to analgesic action of morphine, but He's not developing tolerance to the constipating action. See, morphine is an analgesic drug which produces an adverse effect, that is constipation. Now here, the patient develops tolerance to the therapeutic effect but doesn't develop tolerance to the adverse effect. So this is not a favorable tolerance. So tolerance is always favorable when the patient develops tolerance to the adverse effect and doesn't develop the tolerance to the therapeutic effect. Cross tolerance is the development of tolerance between pharmacologically related drugs. For example, the tolerance which develops between alcohol and barbiturates, or alcohol and general anesthetics. So a patient who has been on alcohol, he will be tolerant to drugs like barbiturates and anesthetics. That means he requires a higher dose. That is why we say alcoholics, they require a higher dose of general anesthetics to anesthetize them. Now we'll see what are the mechanisms of tolerance. There can be two, that is pharmacokinetic tolerance and pharmacodynamic tolerance. The pharmacokinetic mechanism is because the concentration of the drug at the site of the action is decreased due to the enhancement of the drug elimination on chronic use. For example, the barbiturates, they enhance their own metabolism on chronic use and thus develop pharmacokinetic tolerance. Pharmacodynamic tolerance is occurring when the target organ becomes less responsive to drugs. So morphine can develop a pharmacodynamic tolerance. You can see barbiturates, it develops both pharmacokinetic tolerance as well as the pharmacodynamic tolerance. Now the last one we'll see is a special type of tolerance which is called as tachyphylaxis. Tachy means fast, phylaxis means protection. It refers to the rapid development of tolerance when doses of a drug are repeated in quick succession. So if you give a drug very fast, in very quick succession, the patient will become tolerant to the effect of the drug. This is seen mainly with indirectly acting drugs like tyramine, ephedrine, and nicotine. These drugs which I mentioned now, act by releasing catecholamines, and then when they're given in quick succession, the rate of synthesis of catecholamines is unable to match the release of the catecholamines which is induced by these drugs, and hence the patient becomes tolerant to these drugs. The other mechanisms which can be involved in the development of tachyphylaxis are the slow dissociation of drug from the receptor or other factors like desensitization, internalization, or down-regulation of the receptors. Okay, so with that, we come to the end of the discussion. The important questions are: list factors modifying drug action, explain the importance of age as a factor modifying drug action. Here you have to describe both the elderly as well as the pediatric age group and whatever I have discussed under the following headings. The childhood dose calculation formulas which we discussed in the slides, pathological states, how they affect the drug action. You have to learn mainly with due reference to the liver and the kidney disease. Pharmacogenetics, you have to prepare as a short note, and you will be quoting all the examples or most of the examples which I have mentioned under this heading. Tolerance and tachyphylaxis, you have to prepare as short notes. And name two drug examples can be asked from any section. So I have quoted many examples at various junctures during this lecture. You have to know all these examples, at least two of them, because this can be asked as name two drugs which inhibit the drug absorption, whose absorption is inhibited by the food. Name two drugs whose absorption is increased by the food. Name two drugs which can cause tachyphylaxis, and so on. Okay, so you have to give two examples of tolerance showing the drugs, and so on. So all these examples you should learn. So with that, we'll come to the end of this session. So we shall go for this interactive discussion on the Zoom, which will be following as soon as I end this recording.